Welcome to another exciting episode of the Insurance Untangled podcast. My name is Ben Tuyene, and I'm one of your co-hosts on this podcast. And as you know, we've created this podcast to help you untangle and unwind yourselves from this whole complex nature of dealing with dental insurance in the dental practice. Today, I have my co-host with me, my new co-host on the insurance panelist for Insurance Untangled. Tessina is one of them. Tessina, welcome to the program today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Always great picking your brain and having discussions surrounding all things insurance. So for today, we've chosen this topic, negotiating with insurance through associations, study clubs, and cooperatives, or like dental cooperatives. But we want to specifically talk about the do's and don'ts, because there's a lot of regulations when it comes to independent doctors collectivizing to negotiate fees. That's prohibited by antitrust regulations. But as of late, I would say in the last 10 years, Tessina and I have been working with an Independent Practitioner Association and learning the do's and don'ts in terms of how to deal with those associations, or how to deal with insurance carriers under the format of an Independent Practitioner Association in an effort to affect change on the fee schedule side of things. So quick disclaimer before we dive into this is that we are not going to mention the name of that association, mainly because when it comes to associations, a lot of small study clubs and associations get together and they end up getting sued by the insurance industry, mostly because there's direct violations with regards to antitrust, collusion, conspiracy to raise fees. And no matter how you look at it, even though you're writing off 50%, 60%, even if you're doing the right thing to try to ask for a fee increase, if you're doing that in a group format with independent doctors that have no ownership in your business, that's directly against antitrust. So the best way to sort of navigate the groups that follow the rules, it's always best to stay under the radar with these measures and not make a whole splash or too much noise about it, simply because trying to do the right thing as it pertains to getting doctors what they need financially to sustain quality care. It's unfortunate that the world, mainly the insurance industry, they throw knives at you. They throw darts at your plan and strategy to prevent you from being successful, even though you're following the rules. So with that said, let's dive into this, Tessina. So you and I both work with a group here locally, and we have about 400-ish doctors that are part of the group.
Yeah.
In your take, what are some of the highlight benefits of an association like this, a legal platform of an association that you can affect all kinds of different negotiating strategies, not just fees, but contracts, a lot of doctors wanting to go out of network and all that, training. What are some of the benefits that you've seen that are directly tied to an association type of model, like we have the independent practitioner model that we have in place, as it pertains to fighting insurance?
Yeah, fighting insurance or fee negotiations. Like you said, it's not always fee negotiations. So everybody remembers COVID and the PPE fee that came out, that they said, okay, use this code to cover PPE. And at that time, we had this group and there were some insurance companies that were not wanting to pay the fee. So we were able to have all of the 400 doctors reach out to these insurance companies and request that this be covered, be a covered service, be a fee that they are covering. And because they had such an overwhelming request, we saw that these insurance companies changed where they were saying, we're not going to pay for it, to where, okay, we are going to pay for it. We heard you, we're going to pay for it. So one office alone, or all of us being frustrated, we're all frustrated, but nobody always not always do we know where to go or where to place that frustration or how to make a change. So having somebody there to help guide you through that, but not just guiding one of you, guiding hundreds of you in that same direction, is going to bring change. It always brings change. That's when we get noticed by people, is when we're in these large numbers together. And so it was really fun. We saw several companies, and it actually affected the whole state, not just the group. The whole state wound up getting that benefit of having that service covered because of the efforts of the group.
Yeah. You see all kinds of changes when you get large quantity of doctors being directed to move forward lockstep with a certain concept, an advocacy concept that you mentioned, that has a direct impact on how the insurance industry treats the doctors as a whole for that entire community, right?
Mhm.
So you remember, we won't mention any names, but I'm sure you remember that era a few years ago where there was a lot of splash on all social media with regards to negotiating with insurance and
Oh,
fighting.
yes, I do.
So the doctor that initiated that approached it from the perspective of having really good intentions.
Yes.
But unfortunately, as we all know, I mean, C.S. Lewis and a bunch of others have quotes about what good intentions do. You know, there's,
Mhm.
and not to mock what this doctor did, what he did actually kind of created a recent case studies on how to do things and how to not do things as it pertains to fighting insurance. But there's a really cool quote that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that you could have your heart in the right place, but you know how you go about doing the right thing could oftentimes have a negative impact on you. And this particular doctor, I won't disclose who he is, but it was very hard for this particular person, going all out on social media, calling out the insurance industry, sharing contacts from insurance carriers, saying, hey, we all got to call these insurance companies. So he's on the right path. But the part that really hurt this particular person was the fact that it was too loud. It was too public. It was too much of an open discussion publicly to where there is evidence and an indication that there's a conspiracy to raise fees going on here, right? So if you're in this boat, and there are a lot of associations nationwide that I'm aware of that we consult with that are looking to make change, just be very careful. You don't want to make noise. You don't want to be too loud. It's well, I have a different flavor of taste with movies. So there's a great movie. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Tess, and I don't blame you if you've never heard of it, but it's Denzel Washington in a movie called The American Gangster.
No, I
It's
don't
a
think I've seen it.
it's a true story. It's a movie about a true story where
I'm gonna go
his
watch it.
it's actually it's a good story and a good piece of history as it pertains to the drug problem that we deal with here in the US. And essentially, he took over for a mob boss in New York City, in Harlem. And Denzel's character takes over for this individual, and he figures out how to smuggle heroin from Vietnam
Oh,
during the Vietnam War. And you know what he used to get the drugs here?
what?
U.S. military aircrafts.
Oh,
Yeah. So he was able to smuggle, and he was able to completely destroy all the competition because he found a unique way to compete and sell his product at a significantly lower price point. And he flew under the radar for many years. Now, I'm not saying that we want to, if you're committing crimes, that's how you want to kind of do things, is fly under the radar. No, no, no. He flew under the radar, but because he was committing a crime, he got caught and he spent a couple of
right.
decades in prison. With these concepts, we want to apply the same methodology where you want to fly under the radar. You don't want to make a big splash about it. In fact, so this mob boss, he married I think she was like the what do they call it, the Miss America pageants. So for this on the state level, like Miss
Okay.
Arizona. So this was Miss
Yeah.
Puerto Rico.
Okay.
He married her, this gal, way back then. I think this was in the 50s or 60s. And she bought, leading up towards the boxing world championship bout, she bought this $50,000 fur coat. And the mob boss didn't like that because it's like, you stand out. You're making
Yeah.
it seem like we have money, but you're wearing it. And so what happened is they had front row seats in front of all the celebrities that were like really famous and well known.
Right.
So the cops that were getting spiffs from all the gangsters in New York City, like if you want to do business in New York City, you got to pay your fine, your dues to, in this case, it was a group of detectives. And so these detectives are like, who is this guy? He's African American. He's, married to a Hispanic person, but he has better seats than we have. He's 2 rows in front of us. Who is this guy? And the reason why they were asking who is this guy is because his wife was wearing a $50,000 coat. So anyway, he gets pulled over on the way home. saying, hey, do you know who I am? The detective's like, do you know who I am? He's like, no, should I? He's like, well, all the mob bosses here pay their taxes to me. And so you owe me money. It's like, how dare you operate in my town and not pay your dues? So they harassed him. They actually went to his house later, and they found while he was out of town, and they raided it. It wasn't on the books. It was an illegal search, but they took all the money that they could find. But it was the coat that caught the attention. That's the reason why he ended up in prison. Well, that particular cop and all the detectives, they all ended up in jail. In fact, some of them, well, I won't talk about what happened to each of them. But that's a long story to say that when you're fighting the insurance, whether it's individually or on a group level, like if you have an independent structure, Independent Practitioner Association type of structure, which is a great structure to use, is that you still need to make sure that you're flying under the radar so that even though you're doing the right thing and you're following the laws. The insurance industry has way more money to exhaust your legal resources by dragging you into a court in a frivolous lawsuit that's going to cost you a few $1,000,000. Even though you're right, you'll lose that case because you don't have a big enough of a war chest, right? And so that's why I say that it's always best to fly under the radar, because we don't want to be made an example of. As innocent as we are, and as much as we're trying to follow the rules, you will get punished for doing the right thing.
Exactly. Well, and I'd like to add to that. So the insurance companies are watching and looking and trying to find the ways that we're finding around them, right? So we're finding our ways around what they have set up to get higher fees or to make those differences. When they find out what we've done, they change the game again. So they adjust to it and they find a way to stop us so that we can't get the higher fees or we can't make the progress we'd like to make. And then we have to find a new way. So again, when we're announcing how we have figured out our way around their stops, their blocks, their walls, right? They just change where their walls are.
They do. They move the target, right?
By
the time
and then we have to dialed it all over again.
You've zeroed in and dialed in your scope. By that time, the target is different. So, but I guess there's a question, and I'd love to know your opinion. This is a question I've never asked you before, Tessina, in terms of organized dentistry, right? And when you look at study clubs, that's a form of organized dentistry. When you look at the American Dental Association, the Utah Dental Association, the dental societies, that's all organized dentistry. What is your take on the fact that nationwide, so many doctors, like some states, less than half of the doctors are members of the American Dental Association? What is your take on why, or on representation? Is it important for doctors to have some type of association to latch to gain some type of representation and advocacy in a way that actually creates meaningful change? What is your take on just the association models in general? What's good and what's bad, and what do you recommend for doctors to consider?
I think it's definitely good to have some kind of advocate for you or some kind of a system. And that is what did you say? The American board. That's what that started out as. The reason people aren't joining it anymore is because it's not as helpful as they thought it would be. It's structured into something else, or they're becoming more and more limited by what they think they have to do to please, again, or not upset insurance companies. So they're not advocating as hard as they used to, or as hard as some of us wish that they would. But there's other means. There's other advocacies or associations that you can join to make these changes or make these efforts. And I think we should. Again, something good about that American board or some of these bigger associations is they do keep in mind the proper laws and rights that we do have to follow to make our changes legal. And you want to do that. We can't just go like wild cowboys, right, on our horses and just say we want change. We saw how that went. That didn't go very well. We didn't get the changes that we needed, and some people got hurt by it, right? That's not what we want. We're not going into wild cowboy mode. We need to work together. We need to work smart, and we need to follow the laws and adhere to those laws.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a lot of the stuff that you're doing now, it has a little bit of an impact and sometimes a lot of an impact on an individual dentist. But it's sort of sad to see for those that don't see meaningful immediate impact, kind of like what you mentioned about associations, right? American Dental Association and others, is that there's a lot of activity that goes on. A lot of us don't even hear about the actual advocacy works that the associations do. So therefore, members are canceling because they don't know. They feel like no progress is being made, right? So I agree with what you're saying. What I would recommend for doctors too is that what I often see is that doctors are fleeing associations, but the dues that are paid, you do see a lot of legislation that's helpful. And that it's a result of those membership fees, like non-covered service laws, loss ratio laws that are being passed in states like Massachusetts and every other state that's out there. Those are run by our associations. But I get it, is that there's on the fee schedule side of things, the ADA's attorneys are sort of trying to shape things up here to figure out how we can go about that. But they know that their model is not the solution either when it comes to antitrust and negotiating fees. But what I've observed about you and the Independent Practitioners Association model is that representing 400 doctors, it means a world of difference in how the insurance companies respond. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
What are some of the fears, or like, I know insurance carriers will never disclose to you what their fears are as to why they're giving you these rates, these higher rates. But in your mind, why do you think the insurance industry is willing to make those concessions and give a group of doctors a higher fee schedule than others?
Yeah, so I'll tell you two things. One, the insurance company side of it as to why they say they can't raise the fees is because they're concerned about the effect it'll have on the patient's premiums. And it's baloney. They're raising premiums already, and I can tell you that the employees that work at the call centers are not getting increased pay, and the dentists aren't getting reimbursement rates. So some people are benefiting from these premium increases, but it's nobody on our ground level. The rich are getting richer. I don't know. I'll say something like that. Our reasoning is, and what they won't fully disclose, that you can see happen really quickly, is they need us more than we need them. If we do not have enough providers that are considered in network in their area, the HR departments will start dropping or pulling away from that insurance company and going to another insurance company. When they are not heavy enough, saturated provider wise, they don't sell as many plans. That's just plain and simple. All it is. They can't sell plans, not to HR groups, not to individuals, because everybody goes to look to see, well, how many providers are in my area? Is my provider on their list? They want to stay with the provider that they know and trust, and they will go and look for that information before they even agree to accept that insurance plan. So the insurance companies right now are saying, we don't care. We have so many providers. We don't need to negotiate with you. When 400 doctors or a large amount of doctors start dropping, and we've seen this in several states, and this is happening in a lot of places with Delta Dental right now, that these doctors on their own, not in groups, are just deciding that they've had enough. And what's naturally happening is Delta Dental's ready to make some changes now.
Yeah. And I think the benefit of the association model is that doctors can observe what their colleagues are doing in a more detailed manner, right? Like when you're just sort of calling around, asking questions, or going to dinners, nothing against you doctors, but you love to exaggerate things. Like there's one doctor that I spoke to at the last study club that I was at, and he was telling his colleagues like, yeah, I dropped all these dental plans a year ago, and I'm quite literally making 2 times more than all of you, right? And I know this guy's numbers. I'm like, I know your numbers and I know their numbers. You're only making 20. Well, I mean, it's not a small number, but it's 27%, not necessarily double. But when you're in an independent practitioner association type of model, you're not necessarily colluding with doctors because you can't share certain things with each other, right? It has to be facilitated through a messenger. But you get to observe. You can talk to the messenger about, hey, how are they looking on patient retention? What did they do? How they do that? Like, they're still busy, and they're not losing that many patients. So you have a means of data sharing in a legal way that encourages other doctors to follow suit with the most successful practices that are part of the group, right?
Mhm.
And that has a big time influence on rates, because as more and more doctors sort of negotiate under a legal collective platform, or start to go out of network, like what we've been seeing, you see massive changes. So
Yeah.
with a few minutes that are left, Tessina, this is sort of an on the spot question that we'll kind of wrap things up with. What are some of the highlights that you've seen with the local group in terms of like the last 10-year journey that these doctors have been taking? What are some of the highlights that you can share in terms of how such a unique model has been beneficial for them? And it's not a GPO model. It's not a group practicing organization.
Right.
It is an independent practitioner association model that's designed to affect positive change with insurance companies.
Yeah, so it's been really amazing to watch. Again, some of the benefits of what we talked about, like what is the insurance afraid of, but they don't want to admit to? What are the offices afraid of to make these changes and to make them on their own? They don't know how to do it. And they're afraid that if they do it and they're alone in it, they'll go out of business because all their patients will go to somebody else who's not doing it. So there's so much comfort and support, knowing that you're part of a group and that these efforts are being made in a lot of offices. And again, they don't know which office specifically, but they know these 400 doctors are all charging around the same fees. They all take the same insurance companies. We all work by the same model. And so they're not alone, and they're not going to lose their patients. Their patients are hearing this almost everywhere that they go. I can tell you, if a patient calls 2 offices and hears the same thing, they stop calling. They assume that that's the case everywhere. So we only need, a couple of offices involved here for them to get that response. And the more saturated we become, the more success we get with that. But these providers that have joined this group have amazed me at their strength and their willingness to make the change. So again, under an IPA, you don't have to do the changes that everybody else is doing. We just give you, the messenger gives you some recommendations. You can take them or leave them. That's up to you. But what I've seen is everybody's ready and everybody does it. And they have that comfort of knowing that they're not alone in this. So what they've done is made incredible waves and incredible changes in the industry that, again, have affected people statewide just because of this group of these doctors who are willing to make the change. They're willing to do what is scary or can seem scary or risky. And then after they make the change, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did that. Why didn't I do that sooner? But they were nervous just like everybody is. But once they go through with it, they're really happy. But we've seen super high reimbursement rates. We've seen, like I said, with the PPE fee, we got that PPE fee covered. We've had some insurance companies investigated because the group has gone and complained against a specific insurance company together. We have seen also some networking of when somebody's needing an office manager or an assistant or something, some really neat networking opportunities where they're able to help each other that way as well. Somebody just moves, right? It's a good relationship. They've moved from here to there. It's too far for the drive. And we're able to network a little bit in that way to say, hey, can somebody offer her a position? She's fantastic. And it's been really fun that way too. Another thing is merchant accounts, like your credit card merchant accounts, nitrous oxide fees. There's other group discounts that you get when you're part of an IPA. And so you're saving money on some of the stuff that your resources or things that you're already using. You're saving money there, and then you're increasing your reimbursement rate. So your ability to be more profitable and more successful goes up by, I don't know a percentage, so much.
Yeah, absolutely. You're sort of attacking the idea of capturing discounts as a side benefit from vendors, which
Yes.
funny thing is that just naturally comes when you have a group that you're helping and representing. And so, with this said, I guess our call to action for anybody is that this is the solutions for the future. And we're not going to make a lot of waves about this, because this is most certainly something that has to be done, not necessarily quietly, but it has to be driven by the doctors, right? With some good facilitators like Tessina, who's been fantastic at running our local association. So contact us if you feel like this is something that might be interesting to explore for your area or state. We'd be more than happy to share with you what we know on the do's and don'ts and the successes that do come from this unique style of advocacy that is 100% working. So folks, Tessina, thank you for your feedback today, and great discussion on associations and what to do there as it pertains to making big changes in the industry. So thank you for all your thoughts today.
Yes.
And for our listeners, thank you for joining us on another amazing episode of the Insurance Untangled podcast. If you like today's episode, give us a like, share us on social media or any other platform that you use. This certainly does help other doctors find our content. And if you found this useful and helpful, let us know. Let us know what topics that you want us to cover, and we'll make sure that we cover them on future episodes. Until we meet again, thank you for joining us, and we all wish you all a wonderful day and the best of success. Take care.